Thank you much. Good morning. I appreciate that introduction, Alex. I want to start out actually by thanking the GME team for this invitation for Equus and IBM. Also, want to thank you for the platform to talk about what I think is a truly innovative, really very cool, and maybe seismic shift in global mobility with the introduction and the intersection with artificial intelligence. I also want to thank you, Paul, for joining us today. I understand that you've given up a golf game for this, so we really appreciate that. Paul, senior HRIT manager with IBM. Good morning, Paul. It's great to see you.
Good morning, Rafe, and hi, everybody. Glad to participate in today's conference.
So I wanted to start out with just a brief anecdote, and I think it was two years, possibly three, Paul, at the Equus Dallas Client Conference. During one of the roundtables, you raised a hand and started talking about a vision that you and IBM had for integrating artificial intelligence, predictive analytics into your global mobility program. And I think what's fascinating is at the end of that session, I know that there were some attendees who were very interested. There were some attendees who maybe raised their eyebrows. This is something that I think we all can agree that the global mobility industry has been chasing for a long time: predictive analytics, automation, and what artificial intelligence can bring. I'm wondering, Paul, can you just tell us briefly about your role at IBM and what brings you here today?
Sure, thanks, Rafe. I've been in global mobility approximately 10 years. My discipline is focused on systems management and business transformation. And we did implement Assignment Pro, as you mentioned, in 2018, in June 2018. And during that time to the present, I've also established a data analytics function within mobility. And we did launch earlier this year Watson AI. The application is called Your Global Mobility Advisor, YQMA. Just to give you some background about IBM's program, we do have 4 mobility programs, a traditional IA, and within there we have policies and plans. We have in the past year outsourced some of the administrative functions of the program, specifically mobility consulting, immigration, and tax preparation.
Paul, I've heard you in the past refer to the delivery model for your mobility program as on-demand, or your on-demand model. Can you tell us what that means?
Sure. Previously, we had a static model. We had a set number of mobility consultants, team members, et cetera, administering the program. And now, with the acceleration of COVID, obviously for a lot of people, travel has diminished quite significantly. So we've shifted to an on-demand model. So that on-demand model is a model whereby we don't have people necessarily sitting around. We have folks working with the vendors, and that can either scale up or scale down based upon the volume. So it's truly, in the sense of the term, on demand.
So we're here to talk about policy. So reverting back to IBM global mobility policies, when I started working with you, I know that you had a traditional model and approach of creating policies, administering them, updating them. Obviously, in any policy maintenance, there are a number of constituents, folks who want to have input into that process. There are probably a couple of meetings to talk about what a policy should look like. What were some of the challenges that IBM experienced with a more traditional policy creation and administration policy?
Sure. So there's basically 4 key areas with administering it. There's always the constant refresh, frequent review of the policy, of the plans. Are they meeting the business needs? Are they meeting the needs of our assignees? Additionally, we're doing, there's difficult to predict employee satisfaction. So that's why we're always doing a refresh of our plans and our policies. And then there's also an increase of exceptions. When you have standard policies or plans, there is always the possibility of exceptions. So we're trying to minimize those exceptions. And then finally, there are no two assignments alike. Every person is different. Every assignment is different. Everybody has different needs and wants. So working within that framework of established policies and plans, it's very hard to fit people to a plan or a policy.
It's. I think you're very generous when you say that occasionally exceptions arise in global mobility. A colleague and I who I once worked with shared that she didn't administer mobility policies; she administered global mobility exceptions. So that's certainly an area that I know from personal experience and from working with others that the entire exceptions process adds a lot of overhead and challenges for any mobility program. Among those other challenges, it was, if I understand, the IBM mobility leadership that approached you and the rest of your team to look at how artificial intelligence can augment your global mobility program. So, can you tell us a couple of the strategic goals that drove that challenge from the mobility leadership?
Well, just like any IA implementation, people are very concerned about what it does to them. So we try to make sure that our AI efforts were designed to put the employee first, the assignee first. We wanted to move to a greater degree of flexibility, so we try to customize our plans and our policies, make the budget more personalized, and truly, like you said, reduce the number of exceptions. Our ultimate goal is to eventually eliminate all the plans that we have, just work within programs, and then simplify the authorization process, which was a significant improvement based upon what we were doing in the past. And by simplifying that authorization process, we freed up our global mobility professionals to focus on other aspects of their roles. So they're moving from a administration type task versus a value add task.
So, a little bit of timeline, then it was in 2018 when IBM and Equus started working together to implement Assignment Pro. Then around 2020, early 2020, these internal conversations started at IBM about AI, Watson AI, and how that would integrate. Uh, Eventually, those discussions became YGMA, which you had referenced earlier, your global mobility advisor. So let's dive into that. Tell us what exactly is YGMA.
So YQMA is an app. It's a self-service app. It is all based on Watson AI that's available in the marketplace today, all developed by IBM. YQMA is a self-learning tool or app. What it's doing, it's combining historical data, which we seeded with APRO data, plus the business rules. So we know every mobility program has business rules. So it's the historical data plus the business rules, plus also recent assignments to deliver a customized mobility plan. And when I say recent assignments, what I mean by that is people enter their authorization and it gets approved. Watson is learning from that. It's adding it to its memory bank. So the more information we provide it, the better it grows, the more accurate or more precise recommendations it can make. So there's three distinct sources of information that Watson uses to calculate. Again, it's the historical data, the business rules, and the recent assignments. And as I mentioned, it's all self-service. So the manager and the assignee can go in, put in their home and host country, the duration, are they accompanied, unaccompanied, etc. And Watson will come back dynamically, instantly, with a recommended plan and a set of allowances or provisions, whatever you want to call it. And doing so, it really is customized by the employee or the assignee, because the assignee can then look at what's been recommended and say, hey, I don't need pet shipment, for instance. I want a bigger container because I'm taking my surfboard. So that endeavors to improve employee satisfaction, but also to reduce the number of exceptions that we mentioned earlier. And it's all through a new digital experience, as we said earlier as well.
So, Paul, in addition to identifying policy provisions, putting that historical data, the business rules together, are there any particular financial functions in YGMA, either in cost reporting or in cost projections?
Yes, there are. We do cost reporting. We do projections. So Watson presents a low budget estimate as well as a high budget estimate, and it's based upon the core flex type of model. So there are core things that every individual receives when they go on assignment, but as I mentioned, they also have an opportunity to select within a range certain additional allowances or provisions. They could reject or unselect certain allowances, and they can add some others, but as long as they're working within the set budget that Watson has recommended.
Paul, just to take a little bit of a detour, how many of the different stakeholders that were involved in this process of developing YGMA, as we've talked about, the assignee, the managers, the global mobility consultants, obviously technical resources. How big was the team that was put together to implement YGMA, and from what parts of the organization from IBM did they come?
Sure. So there was IBMers from all sorts of disciplines. We had data scientists participating in the project. Obviously, we had developers who developed the app. We did also engage an industrial designer to design the screens. And then key to the whole project, too, was our offering team, our policy team, as some companies call it. They brought the business rules around provisions and allowances and what Watson could work within. So they set the guardrails, if you want, or the boundaries. So I would say roughly full-time equivalents. Some of these people came and went in a project, but full-time equivalents, we probably had about 10 to 15 people at any given time working on this project. We also prepared training materials, communications, et cetera, to roll out to our internal community.
Yeah, I was just going to ask about the training process. Was there training, or were there materials that IBM provided for everybody involved in this process? So obviously the mobility team, but also the assignees or the employees, the employee managers. Was that all part of what was prepared for the rollout?
So there was two types of training, right? There was specific training for the mobility consultants, which is now part of our business partners and immigration firms, so they could understand our new tool, why we were doing it, et cetera. For the general population of IBMers, we produced a video, and that was for general consumption. And then we have an internal website where we posted information on Watson YGMA. But there are only a couple of screens, and it is self-service, and there's not much training that is needed in order to fill out the screens. It's very self-explanatory. We do have just-in-time help. We also have a glossary attached to it. So it's almost as easy as going online and ordering some supplies that you might order at home. So it's very straightforward communication with the groups.
So I'm hearing that it was a large group of people with diverse talents and areas from the organization coming together to really create this point of entry for the employees and managers to work together to come up with use this application YGMA, identify the benefits for that assignment. And after all, this is Watson. There's probably nobody in the audience here who isn't familiar, at least somewhat, with IBM Watson. A question came to mind yesterday. What if, after using this app, and there's a conversation between the employee and the manager about what these what the benefits look like? What if they think Watson's wrong?
So good point. And I'm sure there's going to be challenges, but we still have our mobility consultants in place. We have our internal mobility function in place. So, and we also established a help desk queue. So any way that they want to reach out to us, they can. They can Slack us, email us, use the queue, etc. And we're here to support them. We're here to support them virtually 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we haven't, because it's self-service, because it's Wattons, and we have not just turned our back on the assignee or the manager. We're still here to support them and work through their questions, and take in any suggestions they have for improvement as well.
That's great to know that there's a back door to have those discussions. One of I think the fundamental philosophies underlying what I understand IBM is trying to do with YGMA is hyper personalization, and I think that's a term that can be broadly applied in the market and also now by IBM and global mobility. Can you tell us a little bit about what hyper personalization means and what it means to IBM mobility?
Sure. So it's something that, Rafe, that I've been advocating, as you know, even within Assignment Pro, because there are no two assignees alike. There are no two assignments alike. Everybody has different wants and needs. And hyper-personalization, what that is fundamentally is using the data that's available to deliver a more personalized, tailored service. And in our case, a mobility assignment. And I can give some really good examples, two good examples that come to mind that are in the industry today. So everybody owns a pair of jeans, whether they're Levi, Wrangler, or whatever. But I do know, and it's been published, I've read a few articles about it in the Wall Street Journal, how Levi has a tailor shop. So regardless of cut and style, you can have customized jeans. Another example that comes to mind is, and I mentioned it a few minutes ago, is when we're shopping on the websites. So whether we're browsing, whether we order, whether we have set up a profile, that website, that vendor is using that information based upon our habits to make a recommendation. So you may see pop-ups when you're on a website. I know shopping in my local supermarket, it knows I've registered as one of those frequent cards they give you, membership cards, and it knows what I buy, and then it spits out a coupon every now and then on things that it's tracking that I'm buying that I might be interested in. So again, it's based on historical data, which is what I described earlier, how Watson is using historical data, business rules, and then current data, current habits to make the recommendation on a policy for the assignee. So I hope that it was clear for hyper-personalization.
Absolutely. So I think we've talked about some of the challenges perhaps that the team has experienced. I know you had mentioned it. We had talked at one point that there was a concern, not a concern, but one of the challenges was data quality. I know you seeded Assignment Pro with many years of data. There are always, clean data, dirty data. There have been some challenges, I think, that you've shared that you can really look at the program from a predictive perspective. What are the types of benefits an individual might use? But there's still need that opportunity to close the loop and say, okay, what was the actual spend? So you can then do a comparison of what the projected spend was and the actual spend. I want to hear, though, how has YGMA been successful so far?
So, well, you mentioned a term about the quality of data. So that for us was a technical challenge because, as you said, we've used Assignment Pro data plus data from historical data from previous expat management systems to feed into Watson. And what we identified is that a lot of that historical data had gaps in it. But what we're moving towards not only using that historical data, that budget information, but we also want to bring in actual data. We actually want to use, for example, an individual has shipping, and we may have allotted $1,000 for shipping. However, it's coming in, actuals are coming in at a lot more than that. So provide that data to Watson and incorporate it in its algorithm to make decisions on the fly by having this actual data coming into it. So your second part of the question is how we experience success with YGMA. We've gotten extremely positive feedback, mainly because of the reduction in the amount of data fields to be entered in the authorization process. So we went from roughly 50 or 60 fields to be filled in on an authorization down to 10 fields. So as I said, we simplified that. We've reduced the time it takes, obviously, from about 80%, takes about 30 minutes or so to fill it in once you have, your home and your host, etc. And also the self-service using that industrial designer. We've improved the user experience. So it's truly a digital experience for the user that they're familiar with. It looks like you're on some commercial website that you just jump in, start using it without much training, as I mentioned.
So, Paul, my next question was going to be about how we had discussed earlier how one of the advantages and the intentions of the design was that the global mobility consultants who were working with with your employees, this has allowed them to shift to add more value to the role that they play in the mobility process, spending more time around relationship, less time around administration. And that's something I'm interested in, how this has added value for the global mobility consultant. But I'd also like to pull in a question. We're starting to get some questions in, and I think related is, and I'm starting to, this is a common theme we're now seeing in the questions, is in addition to how this is adding value to the global mobility consultant's role, is there something in this that is replacing the personal touch?
So to answer the first question on global mobility consultants, because the employee has self-service now, they can make the decisions on their own. However, if we eliminated the personal touch, we haven't. Because rather than dealing with exceptions and walking people through filling in a screen, which they can fill in the screen today because it's very simple, they could spend more time with the assignee on making choices. What's the best housing in that particular location? I am traveling accompanied with 2 children. Can you tell me I'm thinking of bringing this certain amount of household goods. Can you help me decide on the size of my container? You're also interested maybe on what the environment is like, climate environment, etc. So they can spend time on the things that matter to the employee versus working through exceptions and how to fill out screens and all the administrative tasks that normally go with the mobility consultant. So to me, it frees up a lot of time to spend time on the value-added tasks.
Thank you.
And I can add one other point there too, as I'm thinking, is that with Watson, you could run many dynamic calculations. So you could go in and say, hey, I'm running from starting assignment November 1st through February 1st. Oh, now I want to do it again once accompanied, once unaccompanied, or once with children, so Watson will return those results instantly. So those in the past, they were entering that information in an assignment form, and they were not receiving instant results. They were waiting for the mobility consultant to process it all and come back with a cost estimate. Versus now it's instantaneous, and they can do a lot of what if with it, and then ultimately focus on or select one of those plans or recommendations, I should say.
Yeah, tying right back into the predictive and the predictive analytics and the
Right.
projections. We're starting to get some more questions in, and I think this is a good time to jump into a few more. I did want to remind people if for some reason we don't get to your answering your questions. Paul and I talked about it, and we're committed to answering your questions one way or another. So if we don't get to it, stay tuned. Here's an excellent question. Once the budget has been established and the assignment begins, how does YGMA interface in the actual move management, the service delivery? And I think we've touched on some of that. But here's the second part to this question. Can the assignee change his or her mind after choosing benefits?
So for the first part, how do the services get executed, I think was the question. So YGMA today, once the budget is selected and approved, because YGMA is doing the approval process, it's sending out the notifications, the finance person, the manager approve it, and then what happens is there's a feed from YGMA into Assignment Pro. And Assignment Pro then sends off the service orders to the appropriate business partners to get the various allowances or provisions activated and start processing them. Should there be a change, maybe once the assignment is approved or once the person hits the ground, we do have that opportunity, and that'll all be processed through Assignment Pro. That's the system of record that we're going forward with. That contains all the historical data. Obviously, through Assignment Pro's document management, it has the various forms, et cetera, that we're retaining. So we don't just, it's not locked in. There's always changes that happen. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the queue, the help desk queue, that they can get in touch with us to either request a change or assistance with what's going on in their assignment.
We have another question, and I think this goes to the data quality part of this. So APRO is acting as the central repository or source of truth. How frequently does Watson extract that data from APRO?
So today we seeded all the historical data that APRO has, and any new assignment that's generated is generated in YGMA. So we no longer need to take APRO data and move it into YGMA, because as I mentioned, once the assignment is approved in YGMA, it's added to its memory bank, and it's using that to keep building upon. So think of it like Legos, we'll keep building upon it. What we do want to do to complement all that is bring in actual data. And we're studying that right now. We want to bring actual data into either YGMA directly and or into APRO, so we can do cost-benefit analysis. We haven't decided yet, but that actual data will help in providing more comprehensive calculations and budget recommendations. So to summarize, we've seeded the original APRO data, but all new assignments are going through YGMA today. And once it's approved, that data is added to the memory bank of Watson AI.
So then you're saying that it's actually YGMA that now that it's been seeded with all of the historic data, YGMA is now the source of truth for the total cost, both the history and rolling in the new cost of current and new assignments. But then the analytics part of your budget to actual, how accurate were your predictions, that's going to take place within APRO or APRO and YGMA together. Did I understand that
Well,
correctly?
yeah. Well, it'll will take place, Rafe, in April, but also too, as I mentioned at the top of the session here, is that we did establish a data analytics function. So all this data, whether it's YGMA, APRO, data from our vendors, is in our data analytics server, and we've established Cognos to create various reports, histograms, the ability to combine mobility data with other HR data to do deeper predictive analytics. And some people may say, what is predictive analytics? Well, we're looking to predict maybe future outcomes of an assignment. So matching the employee to an assignment, employee selection, use the analytics to determine employee retention and repatriation. And then, and the easy one and the obvious one is what the question was vendor and cost analysis, putting in maybe some customer set information based, rating their vendor, the experience with their vendor, and we could do a lot of analysis on that if it's been beneficial to the assignee and do some prediction on it. So it's all companies have this data. It's how you use the data in order to do the predictive analytics going forward.
That actually leads me into my next question, Paul. There's obviously, as we talked earlier, there were a lot of resources, both in individual human capital and technical, plus Watson, going into the YGMA program. I always know you're very gracious and want to offer something that people can take away anytime you share about the program. If an organization doesn't have access to AI technology or YGMA or the YGMA type functions, is there a way they can get started doing this in their own systems in house today?
So there is, Rafe. It's if companies don't have access to Watson AI or any AI tools, everybody has the data. There's no question about that. We all have deep pools of data. It's just how do you combine it? So if you have an expat management system, whether it's Assignment Pro or something else, you can generate reports. And those reports, you don't have to look at the data by individual. You can look at the data by home and host country combinations. You can look at the data by the duration of the assignments. And you could see what's been used in the past. For example, how many people have shipping, how many people have pet shipment, whatever the case might be, you can start reducing the data to some common denominators. And then based upon that, using something like an Assignment Pro and other expat management systems, you can adapt that to employee choice or employee elections. So I know the industry is moving towards cost flex, core flex assignments. So you have your set of core, and then you have your set of flex. So you could look at your core flex, take that data that you've boiled down to your provisions and allowances, and start matching that up. And that's all. Actually, it is all programmable today, and probably all of the expat management systems that are available in the marketplace. If you don't have an expat management system, it'll take a little longer, but you could do that through various spreadsheets. Tracking each assignment, tracking what allowance and provisions were provided based upon duration and home host country, and then doing some analysis on that, and then making a recommendation for a future assignment to an assignee. And then you could sit with them too. You could take it forward, sit with them, and allow them to do some employee elections.
I have a great question here about the process, and I think we've touched on some of it, but we've really got multiple players in here. And as you mentioned at the top, that you've outsourced a number of the functions of the mobility program. So, what is the back end integration between YGMA and Equus software, and then how does that transmit or transfer or translate into the information that's going off to the relocation management company?
Sure. So there is an API between YGMA and APRO today. So everything that was selected and proved in YGMA gets entered into APRO. APRO, the assignment is created behind the scenes. There is an assignment record. There is an assignee record. From there, APRO, as you know, has service orders and APIs that we've established, and we're using them all between our medical provider, our immigration law firm, and our RMC. Some of them are service orders, some of them are APIs, some of them are just CSV files. This all happens daily. And in turn, our vendors, our business partners send us data back that we're constantly updating Assignment Pro. So passport has been issued, shipping container has been shipped. So we're collecting that data and storing it in Assignment Pro. And to take all this data full circle, as we said on data analytics, we then have numerous reports out of Assignment Pro using all that data, but also we have the data analytics server that's tied in with Cognos that we could marry that data, and we are marrying that data to other HR data to do deeper predictive analytics and more prescriptive analytics. So for me, reporting is looking at the past. We want to understand, there's four types of data analytics. It's reporting, predictive, prescriptive, and descriptive. So we want to move from just your customized reporting to descriptive and predictive analytics. And that's where the value add is. And we need both Assignment Pro and the data analytics server in order to make that all work.
It's an excellent question. Know that YGMA supports international assignments. Is there also a function in it that would support a domestic program? Sort of the first question. And the second part of that question is, and I think this is a question that a lot of folks have, is what does it do in terms of tax calculations?
So we have rolled out, just like Assignment Pro, we have rolled out YGMA internationally. So it's there. We are using it across the globe today. Can it do something domestically? I'm assuming you mean someone lives in New York today and they want to move to California. So Watson is based on a set of rules and the historical data, and what we want to do is the actual data coming in. So it's how we program it. It's how the data we give it plus the business rules, and it can be set up for anything. It could be set up domestically, and it is set up internationally. And it doesn't have to be the U.S. There's many other countries that also have states like India that people move from one state to another, or canton from one canton to another. So it's what you give it. Think of Watson as a canvas. But what Watson brings to the table is the artificial intelligence, which is using, and I'll just give one example, not to get too technical, is the random forest, how it goes down through all these calculations to make a recommendation. And then I think, Rafe, you said the second part of that question was?
Actually, that was around the tax calculations.
Oh, tax.
I do just want to say, though, we have a little bit over 2 minutes for folks who've continued to put questions in. As I said, we'll get to those. So yeah, maybe if you can share on how YGMA approaches or handles or reports on the taxes.
Sure. So right now, our tax calculation is very rudimentary. We are working with our tax partner for the second release of YGMA to have more precise tax calculation. But right now, it's just using a flat calculation, plus or minus a certain percentage to provide a fairly accurate cost estimate. But like I said, our next release, we're working with our tax provider to improve that calculation. So we're
That's
taking
great, and I'm
baby
sure.
steps.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure having Watson on your side, you'll be successful. I'm sure working through that part of the program. I just wanted to again thank you, Paul, for taking this time to share with us. I think this is really, as I said at the top, this is cool. It's also innovation, and I think it really is presenting a real shift in the mobility industry. I am hoping, I'm anticipating there will be as much excitement about this after coming out of this session or this talk as there was when I first heard you bring up this idea at the Equus conference a number of years ago. Again, thank you very much. And on behalf of Paul and myself, I would like to turn this back over to Alex and the GME team.
Thank you.